Right now, the Middle East is sitting on a knife's edge until the Iranian regime will fall or until the head of the snake is finally cut off. This war is far from over, and that's exactly what you're about to see now matters so much to all of us.
That's right. Yair and I had the privilege of being part of a landmark documentary series hosted by the one and only Erick Stakelbeck, Heroes of October 7th and Beyond. In a powerful episode called The Head of the Snake, the big picture of Israel's ongoing war against Iran, we sat down with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Minister Dermer, IDF commanders on the front lines, and some of the sharpest minds covering this war anywhere in the world.
This is the episode that you need to watch, so stay with us.
The regime began to give the Mein Kampf in the mosques and in schools.
Iran is no ordinary enemy. It's the head of the snake.
Our assessment was that it would take them less than a year to create not only a nuclear device, but possibly 1 or 2 nuclear bombs.
They're looking to do massive damage to the global economy.
Remind you some words from the Nazi final solution?
Israel is defending Western civilization.
There was footage out of Mossad agents assembling drones in Tehran.
Your role saves lives, and if you make a mistake, people die.
On April 13th, 2024, for the first time ever, Iran struck Israel directly. In the dead of night, a storm of about 170 suicide drones, 30 land attack cruise missiles, and 120 ballistic missiles came roaring out of the skies, launched from over 1,000 miles away. Iran boasted it was retaliation for a recent Israeli strike in Damascus. Israeli jets leveled an IRGC command hub, killing 2 top Quds Force generals. But more than that, Iran was looking for an opportunity to showcase its military might, to prove to the region and to the world that it could hit Israel head-on. Israelis huddled in their homes, sirens screaming. That night felt like the turning of history. Iran, not a terror cell, not a proxy army, but the regime itself was now attacking Israel head-on. This wasn't Hamas. This wasn't Hezbollah. This was a nation of 90 million people sitting on mountains of oil, boasting the region's largest arsenal of ballistic missiles, and driving toward nuclear weapons Israel had been warning the world about for decades.
If this regime were to acquire nuclear weapons, this could presage catastrophic consequences for all of mankind.
Preventing the arming of Iran with nuclear weapons is a global imperative.
Iran will not have nuclear weapons.
It was the most frightening night many Israelis had ever lived through. And then a miracle happened. Almost 99% of projectiles were intercepted, thanks to Israel's superior multi-level air defense system, Iron Dome, David Sling, and the Arrow. 3 layers of protection built to shield the people and land of Israel from rockets, missiles, and long-range threats. And they weren't alone. The United States, the United Kingdom, France, and surprisingly, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE, countries that had historically stood against Israel, opened their airspace, shared intelligence, and helped Israel shield its skies. They too were exhausted by Iranian tyranny and quietly rooted for Israel's survival. But Iran didn't stop. Months later, when Israel executed a mind-blowing intelligence operation on Iranian soil, taking out Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh right under the Ayatollahs' noses, the regime vowed revenge again. Once more, Iran struck. But once more, it failed. Their firepower could not breach Israel's defenses. Let's be clear. Iran is no ordinary enemy. It's the driving force behind the terror, the head of the snake. For decades, the regime has funneled its oil revenue not into building a strong economy and infrastructure for its people, but into a military axis of evil. Weapons factories, missile sites churning out self-destructing drones, cruise missiles, solid and liquid fuel ballistic weapons capable of striking capitals hundreds of miles away with nuclear warheads if unleashed. They built an empire: Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza, the Houthis in Yemen, Shiite militias in Iraq and Syria, all financed, armed, and trained by Iran. Its proxies choked Israel's borders, while Tehran stayed far from the front lines, fighting from the shadows, pulling strings, keeping its hands clean, until it couldn't anymore. And until Israel and the United States reached a moment of historic resolve. It was time to stop focusing on the tentacles and go for the head. But the real question is, why? Why has Iran devoted its treasure, its youth, its future to endless war? Understanding that question is the key to understanding why what began as a regional conflict became a global threat. I'm sitting down with Beni Sabti, someone uniquely positioned to answer that question firsthand. One of Israel's leading experts on Iran, he was just 7 years old when the Ayatollah Khomeini returned from exile in 1979, igniting the Islamic revolution that transformed Iran into the radical Islamist regime it is today. Beni, you were born in Tehran. You lived through the Iranian Revolution. But how was it growing up in Iran before the Ayatollah, and then talk about the changes after he came to power?
Actually, he wrote a book, The Rule of Islam, and most of the book is based on Mein Kampf, on the book of Hitler. Just before the revolution, there were 120,000 Jews in Iran. They had good life, they had jobs.
An ancient community, by the way, from biblical times.
Yes.
Esther, Mordecai.
Yes, 2,500, 600 years of ups and downs and pogroms and other things, but it was a secular and free country, and Jews had prosperity, and also Christians and many other minorities there. All these changed in a few months by propaganda, false propaganda against minorities, a lot of anti-Western slogans. They took over the Israeli embassy. No one was there, so they couldn't take hostages, but they wanted, like what happened in the American embassy.
Of course, 444 days they held those US hostages.
Exactly, and you know what Iranian regime said about that? They said that this was the real revolution, not the physical on the streets. Taking the US embassy, we have to listen to them. They said that the revolution was not complete unless we took the US embassy. And the regime began to give the Mein Kampf in the mosques and in schools. They began to give it to every child. And we understood that we have to run away to escape.
To Israel.
Of course. We connected a smuggler that brought us by foot to Pakistan, and from there, flying to Europe and there to Israel. It took 2 weeks.
Thank God you're here.
Yes.
You mentioned Mein Kampf. Hitler laid out to the world in the 1920s what he planned to do. No one listened. The Iranian regime has done the same over the years. They've laid it out. As you said, listen to what they say. They mean what they say. The first rule of war, Sun Tzu, know your enemy.
Just look on IRGC symbol. They have the world and a gun on that. We want to take the world. Exporting the revolution is the most important thing. They come with the money, they establish free kindergartens, they establish mosques, and they begin to bring the propaganda. We are the good ones, Jews are the bad ones, and they brainwash you. You go to heaven to meet some virgins, I don't know. So they do it in Lebanon, they do it in Syria, in Iraq, in everywhere. They do it in Europe, Islamic centers, and also in US. The IRGC is in everywhere, inside Iran and outside Iran. They have 16 propaganda organizations.
The IRGC, that stands for Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps.
Yes. You know what is missing in their name?
Iranian.
Where is Iran? We had to understand it in '79. Another organization that have no name of no country in his name, Hamas, Harakat Mukawama Islamiyah, the Islamic movement. Where is Palestine?
It truly is a global revolution.
Exactly.
It starts in Iran, it spreads throughout the Middle East, to Europe, to America. That's the ultimate end game.
Like the IRGC symbol, if you don't export the revolution will die.
Why is this regime so obsessed with destroying the world's one and only Jewish state?
It's not about Israel. It's about the West. All the other ideologies, democratic, liberal ideologies. They say, I am the right, all of the others are wrong. So we have to destroy them. So the terror program and the propaganda, these were the main things that hit Israel and West. And when terror doesn't bring the answer, you go to the missile program. The nuclear program is, again, another upgrade. We cannot destroy Israel, not by terror and not by missiles. Okay, so we have to do something that can be final. Remind you some words from the Nazi final solution? Again, we are there.
April 13th, 2024, it was the first time the Iranian regime directly attacked Israel. And in doing so, they brought the wrath of Israel upon their own heads, really. Just incredible accomplishments. I mean, they literally know where the Iranian generals sleep. How is Israel able to do this inside the borders of its greatest enemy?
Yes. The reason of that is because the Iranian people hate their regime.
The Iranian people loathe this regime so much that they were willing to work with Israel.
It's not about money. It's about I'm hating this regime more than the risk of cooperating with Israel.
What happened next will be studied in military academies and debated by analysts for decades. A mission known as Operation Rising Lion and a war named the 12-Day War. Who would have believed that after 20 brutal months of war, Hamas in the south, Hezbollah in the north, missiles from Yemen, drone swarms from Iraq, that this tiny country, just 77 years old, would turn and take on the heart of evil itself. But as the war dragged on, Israeli intelligence discovered that Iran was on the brink of delivering a fully assembled nuclear weapon. Not just one, but the foundation to build many. At the same time, new intelligence revealed a massive missile production factory in development, one designed to produce 20,000 new ballistic missiles over the next few years, each capable of carrying a warhead. With Iran's missile arsenal already exceeding 3,000 precision-guided ballistic systems, most capable of reaching distant targets with lethal force, the threat was not hypothetical. It was real and urgent. All the pieces were aligned. An American president who understood Iran's threat and backed Israel 100%. In the dead of night on June 13, 2025, Operation Rising Lion was unleashed. Mossad sabotaged Iran's defenses from within. Then, wave after wave, Israel's Air Force slammed over 100 sites across Iran, centrifuges, missile factories, IRGC command posts. In a stunning blow, Israel also eliminated numerous Iranian military commanders and nuclear scientists. The world held its breath, and then the U.S. joined in, dropping bunker-busting bombs on Iranian nuclear sites at Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan. Back home, Israel braced for the storm. Home Front Command activated a nationwide warning system, giving families enough time to reach shelter as Iran unleashed volleys of deadly ballistic missiles, ruthlessly targeting residential neighborhoods and even schools and hospitals. Israel's air defense system intercepted most of them, but not all. For 12 days, it was a national mission. The Air Force, intelligence, special forces, Home Front Command, and civilians standing together. Operation Rising Lion dealt a significant blow to Iran's nuclear and missile programs, setting them back and demonstrating that Israel, despite being a fraction of Iran's size, is a force to be reckoned with. I'm sitting down with Jonathan Conricus, former international IDF spokesperson and leading defense analyst, to unpack Israel's extraordinary deep penetration campaign against Iran. Jonathan, thanks so much for joining us. Talk about the years of planning and intelligence work that went into this operation.
Yes, I think there was a collective astonishment at the Israeli achievement of actually penetrating Iranian airspace, dismantling air defenses, and striking almost all of the components of the Iranian nuclear weapons program. It was contrary to what many in the region and in the world believed would be possible.
אנו טייסי חיל האוויר הישראלי, עושים כעת מעל שמי טהרן ומרגישים את התמיכה שלכם כל הזמן. נפגש בבית.
Israel was able to do what it did without even one airman or woman being wounded. Now that's a result of many years of planning, of detail-oriented intelligence analysis, focusing resources on understanding, mapping, analyzing their military capabilities, their air defenses, of course, being, like a hawk on the Iranian nuclear program, all of its components, because there are many rogue nations in the world that are willing to supply the Iranian regime with the components that they need for the nuclear program. China, Russia, North Korea, Pakistan, other countries that sadly, recklessly are, fueling madmen, giving them the tools for weapons of mass destruction. But Israel, what it did was to track also the personnel. The scientists, the scientific minds, the key players of the Iranian nuclear program that were taken out. If you don't have people who know what they're doing, then you can have the best centrifuges in the world, but you won't get far. We're talking about Mossad agents in Iran over an extended period of time, They built the network, the facilities, the safe houses, and everything was in place so that when the order was given, all systems were go and all pistons fired in synchronization.
How does that even happen, Jonathan, for Israel to get so entrenched inside Iran under the regime's noses? Is a lot of that due to the discontent of the Iranian people against the regime? They're willing to work with Israel, perhaps, against the regime?
Yes, that's part of it. It's done, by a lot of creative and hard work by men and women of the Mossad. You don't get to such a level of operating deep into enemy country, 1,000 miles away from Israel, without years of going in, assessing who can you work with and how can you find common interest with people on the ground who are at risk. If they get caught, they will face the most severest of consequences. And Mossad went in, their agents and people on the ground were able to establish those networks. We're talking about a nationwide network of informers, collaborators, agents, people that really were part of a big system. So that's number one. Number two, the US and Israel were coordinated extremely well, and in fact were able to lull the Islamic regime into a false sense of security by conducting negotiations, but by having a military option ready the moment that the presidential deadline expired.
I would love to be able to make a great deal, a deal where...
And I come to you in good faith. If we do progress here, and if you, the Iranians, start to show me that you're willing to stop developing nuclear weapons, I will tell the Israelis to stand down. But the Iranians didn't. And I have a lot of respect for the Iranians. I have respect for the Islamic Republic. I think that they are great planners. I think that they are long-term calculators. What I think that got the best of them was hubris. I think that they overestimated their own capabilities, underestimated Israeli resolve, creativity, and stamina. And I think they did the worst thing that anybody in combat can do. They started to believe their own propaganda. And they started to believe that they can defeat Israel.
When we return, I'll be sitting down with Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu as the region stands at the edge of its most defining moment in decades.
And when we speak about Iran's war against Israel, we're not speaking only about strategy, about missiles, or about nuclear threats. We are speaking about real families, real cities, real communities that wake up one morning and discover that war has reached their streets, their homes, their neighborhoods. That's exactly what happened in Dimona, an Israeli city in the middle of the desert. Meir Panim's branch in Dimona was hit after a direct missile strike in that area. The building suffered severe structural damage and is now completely unsafe to use. What was once a place of warmth, dignity, and daily meals is now filled with broken glass, debris, and instability. More than 470 residents were displaced because of this attack, and thousands of homes were affected. And right in the middle of all of this, Meir Panim, a lifeline for so many people, was directly impacted. Inside the building, ceilings are at risk of collapse. Electrical and plumbing systems have been destroyed. Entire sections of the facility need to be rebuilt from the ground up. And yet, the meals that they provide to those that depend on them did not stop coming. Even without the building, even in the middle of the crisis, the teams continue to provide food every single day to the people who depend on them. But emergency operations are not enough. Now, we need to rebuild. Not only to restore what was lost, but to bring this place back to life. A fully functioning, dignified space where people can once again receive meals with respect, consistency, and care. Government support may cover part of the damage, but it will not be enough to restore the heart of this place. That depends on us. So today, as we tell the story of a regime that turned its resources into missiles, we also want the opportunity to answer with something very different: compassion, rebuilding, and hope. If you want to stand with the people of Dimona, an Israeli city in the south of this country, in the desert, and help rebuild this place of hope, we invite you to give today. You can visit bless-israel.org. Again, that's bless-israel.org, and be part of restoring Meir Panim and help the people of Israel, because together we can rebuild. And as we return now to the story of Iran, remember this contrast. One side builds missiles to destroy Israel, our land, our people, and those who stand with her. And then the other side is rebuilding life from the rubble and investing in the future. This is a war between good and evil.
If you were to ask any Israeli leader, any high-ranking general before Israel's war with Iran, what the greatest existential threat to Israel was, the answer would have been immediate: Iran's nuclear program. For years, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu stood before the world at the United Nations, warning of that very danger. Who could forget the moment in 2012 when he held up that cartoon diagram of a bomb?
This is a bomb.
A red marker in his hand, drawing a line and telling the world this is how close Iran is to the bomb.
A red line should be drawn right here.
And this is where they must be stopped. Speech after speech, year after year, Bibi hammered home the same message. Iran's nuclear ambitions were not just Israel's problem, they were the world's problem. The threat was clear. Iran's program wasn't about peaceful energy. It was about enrichment, uranium stockpiles, secret facilities buried deep underground, and the ultimate prize, a nuclear warhead. Moreover, to allow this to a regime that has bullied the entire Middle East for decades with an ideology hell-bent on world domination through extremism would be catastrophic. Israel always knew this day would come. Every general, every intelligence officer, every leader understood that at some point, Israel would have to neutralize Iran's nuclear program. I'm sitting down with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to understand the full implications of a nuclear Iran. Mr. Prime Minister, thanks so much for joining us in Jerusalem and hosting us. How close was the Iranian regime to the bomb? And when did you get the sense that the United States would join the fray and assist in destroying Iran's nuclear program?
Well, I can say it was very close. And I'll tell you when it rushed to do so. As long as it had its noose of death around us, you know, with Hamas in the south and Hezbollah in the north, both trying to invade Israel and exterminate the state of Israel with ballistic missiles and rockets raining down on us. And Israel is a tiny country. It's, you know, it's smaller than New Jersey. They had a plan to destroy us. When we destroyed Iran's terror axis, and especially when we knocked out Nasrallah, the most important Iranian proxy, then Iran saw that its axis, the noose of death, had been gone. It's been stripped away. That's when it decided to rush on what it calls weaponization. That's creating a weapon, an actual nuclear weapon, for the enriched uranium that they had amassed. So our assessment was that it would take them less than a year to create not only a nuclear device, but possibly 1 or 2 nuclear bombs. And at that point, we decided to act. That's the decision. After the defeat of Nasrallah and the collapse of the Assad regime in Syria, they rushed forward, and so we had to rush forward. And President Trump joined us and It's a partnership like no other.
You mentioned President Trump making that decision, and there was a lot of pressure, counter pressure, I would say. Can you tell us why the Iranian nuclear program and the Iranian terror axis in general is a threat not only to Israel, but to America?
First of all, that regime started out just the very first days. They took over the American embassy and held over 50 Americans hostage, a tradition that is continued by their despicable allies, Hamas, in taking 250 Israelis hostages. But they also did other things. They and their proxies arranged the murder of 251 Marines in Beirut. They have bombed American embassies. They have killed and wounded thousands of Americans in Iraq and Iran. All the time they chant death to America. Iran, its plans for destroying America are first to take over the Middle East, and Israel stands in their way. Then to continue to Europe, but ultimately to build intercontinental ballistic missiles that can reach the United States. Right now they're building an ICBM of 8,000 kilometers. That's the present threat. They add 3,000 to it, 3,000 kilometers to it. They reach New York, Washington. Where do you live right now? Texas? It'll take a little more time. But all the eastern seaboard of the United States will be under Iranian nuclear blackmail. That's what Israel is fighting.
And what came next would leave no doubt that being held under Iranian blackmail, whether in Tel Aviv or Tokyo or New York, was something the world could no longer afford to ignore. The 12-day war of June 2025 was a significant military achievement, but it was not enough. Within months, Iran was rebuilding. Its centrifuges were spinning again. Its missile factories were restocking. The regime was preparing itself for another attempt, but there was something else happening inside Iran. For over 4 decades, the Iranian people had lived under one of the most brutal theocracies on earth. No free press, no free elections. Women imprisoned for showing their hair. Dissidents hanged in public squares. An economy destroyed by a regime that spent its people's money on missiles and proxies while its citizens went hungry. Generation after generation growing up with no future, only the regime's revolution. By January 2026, they'd had enough. Millions took to the streets, and the regime did what it always does when its people demand freedom. It opened fire. Tens of thousands killed in a single savage crackdown. Students, workers, mothers, shot down for daring to say no. The world watched in horror. The head of the snake had been wounded. It had not been severed. And now it was devouring its own people. On February 28th, 2026, that changed. In the pre-dawn darkness, Operation Epic Fury and Operation Roaring Lion were launched simultaneously, the most powerful joint American-Israeli military operation in history. Within hours, Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei was dead. Iran's air defense network, built over decades, shattered in a single night. Over 11,000 targets struck across Iran's 31 provinces. 80% of Iran's missile launch capacity destroyed. Its leadership hunted, one by one, with surgical precision. Within weeks, Iran's navy was at the bottom of the sea. More than 2/3 of its weapons production facilities demolished. Its nuclear program struck repeatedly. Its above-ground infrastructure heavily damaged, its path to a bomb set back by years. But a regime that had held power for nearly half a century wouldn't go down quietly. It closed the Strait of Hormuz, cutting off 20% of the world's oil supply overnight. It fired on its own neighbors, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, the UAE. It held global shipping hostage, sending oil prices surging, food costs spiraling, and gas pumps climbing in countries that had nothing to do with this war. Its strategy wasn't just military. It was economic. It was global. And for every person around the world who had quietly filed this away as Israel's problem, the fuel pump, the grocery bill, and the evening news were now telling them something very different. The Iranian regime was everybody's problem. Mati Shoshani is sitting down with Jonathan Spire, one of the most clear-eyed analysts of the Middle East at war, to make sense of where this is going.
Thank you, Jonathan. It's always fascinating sitting down with you.
Thank you.
And 8 months after Operation Midnight Hammer, Israel and the United States start a new operation, Epic Fury. I'm wondering to hear your opinion on what the background to that decision was and what the objective of that war is.
Well, this is a regime that was weakened by an unsuccessful war that it fought against the United States and Israel. By the way, a war which Iran itself, of course, chose to join. It's worth remembering this. Yeah. They then received, a very serious punishment for that. I mean, very serious damage was done to all three of those elements of Iranian power projection, the nuclear program, the ballistic missile program, and the use of proxies. But none of them had been conclusively destroyed. So it was a weakened regime, it had survived, and it was seeking to rebuild itself. What did we see in January? We saw, indeed, the most serious popular challenge to Islamic Republic of Iran at any time since the revolution of 1979, without any question whatsoever. And what happened subsequently? The regime has brutal survival instincts and killed up to 30,000, but maybe more, of its own citizens. It means, yes, this regime is clearly not liked by broad sections of the population. And what we also learn from that is this is a regime with the will to survive and to take whatever means it deems necessary to survive. The economic situation in Iran is a terrible mess. We saw that the Iranian regime is not even able to husband the water resources of the country, for example, in such a way that Tehran can have a clear and safe water supply. So yeah, I'm sure that boosted the confidence to say, yeah, it's a good and opportune time to initiate another chapter of that ongoing contest and to prevent this regime from rebuilding its strength. And from this point of view, the operations have been a clear success. Very clearly, the regime has been massively weakened on all fronts. Yeah. The achievement is very apparent. The question only is the question of regime survival. They also have a toolbox. They've taken control effectively of Strait of Hormuz. By doing so, they're looking to do massive damage to the global economy. This is an ongoing battle, which will only end with the fall of the Islamic Republic of Iran. And that therefore, until that comes, there will be additional chapters. At the end of the day, that's the kind of ballpark strategic view, which I think both the administration and the government of Israel understand well.
Let's shift gears a bit. I want to talk about the opening notes of this campaign. Israel, together with the United States, remove the Supreme Leader Khamenei and a very substantial number of other leaders within, let's call it, the apparatus of the Iranian regime.
Yeah.
What led up to that moment?
Well, Israel's penetration of these systems on the intelligence level has been nothing short of astonishing. To know when the Supreme Leader and other key members of his cabinet are going to be in a particular room at a particular time and vulnerable. To have that ability speaks to years of effort. So now what Israel has shown is that those capacities and those abilities didn't just apply to non-state actors, to paramilitary organizations. They have also been applied to the systems of governance and state inside Islamic Republic of Iran itself. It's a deeply repressive state that watches its population very carefully, and nevertheless, Israel has managed to penetrate it to nothing less than an astonishing degree.
So the Iranians do something very, very odd in my mind, at least. They start attacking all their neighbors.
Yes.
Where does that come from? What were they hoping to achieve?
When you hear the Iranian propaganda talking about this, what they tend to emphasize is they're attacking areas that have United States bases. So the initial justification for it was, well, we're at war with the Americans. The Americans have assets in our neighborhood, so we're going to hit at them. And this, I think, has profound implications for the economic futures, apart from anything else, of those Gulf countries. So the notion is they would put pressure on America to stop. Now, has that happened? Actually, it may turn out that the Iranians very seriously miscalculated in this regard, and that what they're actually going to produce, and there's some evidence of this, is that the Gulf countries cleave closer to America and maybe even to Israel also. They might be saying, hit them harder, take them out, make sure this doesn't happen again.
I'd say there's a philosophical question we need to answer right now, which is people might be watching this and asking themselves, why are we even fighting this war?
Well, first of all, as we've seen, Iranian missile capacity is very extensive indeed. It can't stretch to the United States, of course, but it can stretch to, United States allies in Europe. They can come under the direct threat of this regime, and we're seeing this regime is quite prepared indeed to strike at them. So this isn't a local problem. The other thing I think we have to bear in mind, I think most Americans do consider themselves to be in a long and global contest with the People's Republic of China and its allies. The Islamic Republic of Iran is able to do what it does to a considerable extent because of its relations with China and to a lesser extent with Russia. It's not, of course, that the Chinese are sending naval forces to assist the Iranians in the Strait of Hormuz, although I would note that evidence has emerged of them providing significant materials called sodium perchlorate, an essential component for rocket fuel, to the Iranians in real time. Right now, ships heading out from China, reaching Iran. If America continue to prosper and flourish, as we all hope it will in the decades ahead, it has to successfully meet the Chinese challenge. This element with Iran is the Middle Eastern component of that Chinese challenge, and I think it should be seen as such, and it's vital not to forget that broader picture.
If I look at the axis of evil that is the Iranian regime, isn't there a scenario where they're weakened enough, where there is a virtuous cycle instead of a vicious cycle?
Oh, yeah, definitely. First of all, I think that there's a positive side to the picture, which is that, we're going to win this, I think. Why do I think so? Because I think that our side is the one which can bring prosperity to societies, which can bring chances of development to populations. And at the end of the day, these turn out to be, in the longer term, the most important thing. The other side can only bring poverty. It brings poverty and impoverishment, along with a claim to bring honor and dignity, and it's able to sort of fire up crowds, to acts of aggression. That's its very great capacity, and that's not insignificant, but it cannot bring development and it cannot bring prosperity. So in the longer term, I think there's good cause for optimism. In terms of what you just asked about also, yeah, that's why it's so important that the Iranians come out of this current round weakened. Because yes, that I think will cause China and Russia, other potential allies to distance themselves. They may well say, yeah, it's not worth getting all in behind this regime because this regime can't deliver, and also its days may be relatively short in historical terms.
Well, Israel can deliver. Over 2.5 years of ballistic missiles, drones, and cluster munitions raining down on a nation of 10 million people who are still standing strong, protected by the most sophisticated air defense system ever built, and battle-tested in real time proves this. When we return, we go inside that system. No country on earth has built what Israel has built, an air defense system like no other. Because Israel puts the protection of every single civilian life as its highest priority. The contrast couldn't be starker. Iran spent decades and billions on Russian and Chinese air defense systems, sophisticated on paper, gone within hours of Israel's opening strikes. Twice. And across over 2.5 years of ballistic missiles, cluster munitions deliberately aimed at civilians, and thousands of drones, that shield held. Yair Pinto is sitting down with one of the brave soldiers guarding Israel's skies, intercepting incoming threats, ensuring the nation's safety.
Shalom, Major Ar. Thank you so much for coming here and sharing from your experiences throughout this war. First of all, can you let us know what is your job?
First of all, thank you for having me. I'm a reservist officer. I'm a part of the interception team in the Arrow Battle Management Center. We have several types of weapon systems, each dedicated to different capabilities. Iron Dome, for example, is very famous for its very successful abilities against those short-range rockets from Hamas and Gaza Strip and from Hezbollah in Lebanon. It also focuses on UAVs and those air-breathing targets. We have David Sling for specific targets, particularly from Hezbollah. The Arrow weapon system is in charge and dedicated to intercept MRBMs and long-range ballistic missiles. These are the ones that are launched from over 1,000 kilometers away, and particularly the ones launched from Iran against Israeli civilians.
Let's go behind the scenes of what it takes to intercept all these missiles.
So MRBMs, those are the medium-range ballistic missiles. They have what's called a booster, a very large, about a bus-sized type of a canister that has the fuel that the missile needs to leave the atmosphere. And once that booster separates from the re-entry vehicle where the warhead is, where the munitions is, it creates what we call ballistic picture. It creates a complicated picture. So a lot of what we do is utilizing our technologies to detect those many objects, those many targets, and then to differentiate exactly what we need to intercept. There's a great deal of adjusting the proper defense capabilities, the proper interceptor, to the proper target, and then using those interceptors to provide the widest defense and the most deep defense.
Basically, your role saves lives, and if you make a mistake, people die.
The majority of these systems are entirely manual, entirely operated by soldiers and officers from the air defense battalions. We have a big screen in the Battle Management Center that counts the numbers of missiles coming in. We train not to freak out when those numbers start ticking up. There's a great deal of importance of the operators to be ready, to be vigilant. There are a few lives that were lost that will forever be in our hearts. We treat every single one of those names and every single one of those people as a reminder of why we have to continue training, to continue to be as best as we can in what we do, to try to minimize, to try to prevent, to try to save those lives.
That is the difference between Israel and the Iranian regime. One is committed to protecting every life. The other is committed to its own power, no matter the cost to its people, no matter the bodies in the streets. For too long, the world chose to look away. It swallowed Iran's propaganda. It demonized Israel while embracing the theocracy. It called the victim the aggressor and the aggressor the resistance. The Trump administration refused, not out of obligation, but from shared conviction that a nuclear-armed, terror-sponsoring Iran serves no one's future. What is being built through the fire and the cost and the exhaustion is something the Middle East has never had, the possibility of a region no longer held hostage by one regime's 47-year campaign of destruction. That possibility is worth fighting for. I'm sitting down with Ron Dermer, Israel's former ambassador to the United States and one of the chief architects of that historic partnership. Minister Dermer, thanks so much for joining us here at the Israeli Embassy. It seems that the U.S.-Israel relationship is at a new level now, at a very crucial time, obviously.
Yeah, the partnership between President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu has been critical. The closer we stand together, the more powerful our alliance, the greater the prospects for peace in the region and for security.
This is peace through strength in real time.
I remember when we did the 12-day war against Iran, you had the German chancellor who said Israel's doing the job of all of us, for us, right? It's the one that's getting its hands dirty. Israel is defending Western civilization. When Iran goes, the whole idea of this radical Islamic ideology having history at its back will also go. And I think it could mark a sea change in the region. That was one of the great sources, the great source of instability, carnage, chaos in the region. It's all coming from Tehran. If that changes, the whole Middle East changes, and we move away from war, and we rapidly move towards peace.
There's a growing chorus of criticism, even from the right here in the United States, some segments of the right, I should say, saying, well, it's a one-way relationship. America gets nothing from its relationship with Israel.
Actually, years ago, I had the privilege of being Israel's ambassador to the United States, and the first Independence Day speech I gave on our Independence Day said Israel is going to be the most important ally of the United States in the 21st century. And that sounds like a big statement coming from an ambassador of a country the size of New Jersey.
There is no daylight between our two governments.
Why did I say that? Imagine you're the President of the United States, and you can only choose one ally for the next 50 years in terms of security. Only one. And when you think about security, think about a military that can defend itself by itself, a formidable intelligence service, a cyber capability, and also the capability to build weapons, both offensive and defensive weapons. So who's your ally? Is it Canada? You hear about the Canadian Intelligence Service? Is it Australia? Is it France? Israel has a bigger standing army than France. Is it Germany? Do they building the latest offensive and defensive weapons? No, we sold the Arrow missile defense system to Germany. That's us. You're really down to two countries. You're down to Israel and Great Britain. And Israel's actually standing army is bigger than Great Britain's. I would think that we have a better Air Force. On intel, the Mossad has a reputation, but they do have James Bond. Okay, now I'm going to give you a second question. You can only choose one technology partner for the next 50 years. Who the preeminent power is will be decided by who will lead the world in technological development. And it's either going to be the US or China. And you can't compare Israel and Britain when it comes to technology. So if you only think purely about American interests, the partnership is with Israel. We are America's most important ally. Alexander Haig said that Israel, 1980, he said Israel is an unsinkable aircraft carrier in a region that's critical for U.S. interests, and that's exactly what we are.
It has been a long and grueling war for Israel, the longest in the nation's 75 years, and it has come at a heavy price. Lives lost, families shattered, entire communities scarred. Yet what Israel has accomplished in this time is nothing short of miraculous. Against overwhelming odds, this small nation has stood its ground, not just surviving, but reshaping the story of who it is. For decades, Israel often felt like it had to justify its existence to the world, to explain, to defend, to seek approval. Not anymore. Today, Israel stands strong and unashamed, not begging for survival, but declaring its right to protect its people, to live in freedom, and to chart its own destiny. This war has not broken Israel. It has revealed Israel, resilient, steadfast, unshakable. And beyond its borders, something else is happening. Israel is paving the way for a new Middle East, one where nations can rise together, where prosperity and peace replace fear and tyranny. That vision is no longer a dream, it's taking shape. Next time, we'll look to the future, a future Israel believes is full of promise, potential, and light.
Hello, this is Mati here in Jerusalem with TBN Israel.
This is Yair Pinto from TBN Israel here in Jerusalem. TBN Israel is keeping viewers informed with Israel-focused news, culture, and what God is doing in this land.
Support TBN Israel today online at tbn.org/Israel. Thank you.